Believe it or not, what I've been doing lately on Burns Report, my former political channel, there may be more political stuff added eventually, but my recent attempt at doing TV movie reviews was not the first time for me. Actually, over on my vlogs channel, there was a time when I rebooted that to do vlogs and reviews. And there was one movie in particular that I was attempting to do a review of back in 2017, and I was 40 minutes into that review when I was recording it, and at some point I became frustrated and angry, and I stopped reviewing and I deleted the video, and that was the last time I even attempted at doing a review for the other channel. And I just shortly after rebranded that back to just being a vlogs channel. By the way, you can check out my vlogs channel, my gaming channel in the featured channel section. Fast forward to present day. I'm going to attempt to do that review again. I guess this is my redemption arc. What, 3 years later? Going on 3 years later? So yes, I'm going to, for the second time, review The Last Jedi. First time is lost through history. It's gone. I kind of wish I would have, followed through with it. It's all hindsight. Because maybe that would have got a ton of views. Maybe I'd be part of the fandom menace. I don't know. Maybe I'd be hanging out with all those cool people. Some of them are okay. One or two. But, I do watch their videos. But everything that happens does so as it's meant to. Everything that does not, same premise. So I was going into episode 8. High expectations. Because I did enjoy episode 7, just like we reviewed last time. Despite the fact that it was obviously a soft reboot, it still had potential to lead towards greater things in episode 8 and 9 of the sequel trilogy. And so I went to go watch it. Yeah. So let's do it. My review of Disney Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. My redo. The second one counts. It came out in 2017. And don't forget, the producer of all the sequel trilogies, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, is Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm. It's important to note that. So the director and writer of Last Jedi was Rian Johnson. Now I'm going to say this before I get into the bashing of Rian Johnson and his movie, is that up to this point, I thought he was a decent writer and director, and I guess he still is. But maybe, just maybe, they should have had somebody else in charge of the vision of the trilogy, the sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, the garbage trilogy, whatever you want to call it. And that's why in last week's episode, I made a suggestion. Lawrence Kasdan, who helped write Force Awakens. He also helped out in the writing of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So if there's somebody that they could have assigned as the head writer, the person that the directors had to go through for episodes 7, 8, and 9 in order to have some continuity and connection, in order to make it all fit better and have a definitive vision from start to finish, they should have had somebody like Lawrence Kasdan as the head writer of the sequel trilogy. So I just wanted to point that out. Could have been somebody else entirely, but I think Lawrence Kasdan would have gotten my vote. The score of Rise of the Last Jedi, I don't know why I said that, but the score of all the Star Wars saga movies, episode 1 through episode 9, including episode 8, The Last Jedi, is by the legendary composer John Williams. Most of you are aware of some of his works. Starring Daisy Ridley as Rey, John Boyega as Finn, Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, also Ben Solo. So you have Oscar Isaacs as Poe. You have the legendary Andy Serkis as Snoke. You have Domhnall Gleeson as Hux. Laura Dern from Jurassic Park as Holdo. Also Kelly Marie Tran as Rose Tico. Benicio del Toro as quote-unquote DJ. Along with Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. The late Carrie Fisher as General Leia Organa. Frank Oz has an appearance as Yoda, along with another appearance from Gwendolyn Christie as Captain Phasma. And if I leave off an actor or actress, I do sincerely apologize. And maybe for the sequel trilogy, some of them are probably appreciative if I leave them off. I don't know. So here's the first mistake that happens with Last Jedi. First of many. Is Rian Johnson decided in his infinite wisdom to set The Last Jedi almost exactly after The Force Awakens. That was your first mistake, Rian Johnson. There should have been a time jump. I would say 6 months to a year. Allow Rey some time to spend on Ahch-To with Luke. So there's a training montage so she can go and, start off, obviously clumsy, needing to learn the ways of the Jedi, get better at her lightsaber skills, and then eventually you get her up there, right? From a beginner to a pro. She needed a montage. And we could have had more time with Luke. But setting Episode 8 right after Episode 7 does not allow her enough time. It doesn't. And that's part of the problem. And then, of course, the First Order knows where the Resistance is, and they send a dreadnought after them. And then you have this stupid back and forth between Poe and Hux. And they turn the Hux from like a competent, scary leader of the First Order into a joke. Good job, Rian Johnson. That was his second boo-boo. Then they also turned Poe into a hothead. Another oopsie by Rian Johnson. He just loves subverting them expectations. So you have this space battle that breaks out in order to destroy this dreadnought because it's about to destroy the Resistance base. And Rian Johnson, I like World War II as well. I'm a history buff, and I get it. You're trying to make a version of Flying Fortresses, Rian Johnson, with the Star Fortresses. They suck. The Star Fortresses are crap. They're slow, they're vulnerable, they're easily destroyed. Have you ever heard of another bomber in Star Wars that you could have used? The Y-Wing. Yeah, you could have just used Y-Wings, Rian Johnson, as the bombers. Nothing but subverting of expectations from this movie. There was a scene I found kind of funny at the beginning. The first time I watched what is this movie again? Oh, yeah, it's Last Jedi. The first time I watched it, when Rey's, back at that scene on Ahch-To where she's handing Luke Anakin's lightsaber, and he tosses it. Okay, a subverting of expectations. It made me laugh for some reason. I don't know why. The first time it happened made me laugh. It was early on in the first screening of the movie, and I actually spent money to go watch it in the theater when it came out, and I kind of regret that. But I don't own a copy of it, by the way. I think it was on Disney. It's on Disney Plus. It was on Netflix. Is it still on Netflix? I don't know. But I do not own a copy of Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. No intention to ever own a copy of either movie. So, yes, Luke is no longer Luke Skywalker. He's now what they call Jake Skywalker. Another great decision by Rian Johnson. And so you don't really have much time for Luke to properly train Rey. He's cut himself off from the Force. He's exiled himself over what happened, with the Jedi Temple being destroyed by Kylo, because he's had these visions where he saw the dark side in Kylo. And for a moment, Luke was about to give in to his dark side. He was about to kill Ben, but then he stopped, and then Ben sees his uncle hovering over him with his green lightsaber, and, it causes a little clash between the two, and ultimately the Jedi Temple gets destroyed. Most of the new Jedi are killed. Luke survives. R2 survives. And then he goes to Exegol. Not Exegol. That's not until Episode 9. He goes to Ahch-To. But all this has been done by manipulation by the mysterious Supreme Leader, Snoke. And we get more time with Snoke. And that was something else I enjoyed. More time with Snoke. Credit to Andy Serkis. Great performance he did. And once again, Hux made out to be a joke, and that's sad because I thought Hux was a pretty intimidating, officer of the First Order. And this is when we see Rey go from Rey, a potential interesting protagonist, a character similar to Luke from Farm Boy, to Jedi warrior, hero of the rebellion. Rey goes from something similar to Mary Sue Rey. You can thank Rian Johnson for that decision, and probably Kathleen Kennedy as well. And you have some resets that do occur. Finn awakens from his injuries I don't think there's enough time for Finn to properly recover from being sliced up by Kylo. Another mistake Ryan made by putting episode 7 and 8 like back to back, literally. Finn has been reset into a coward, even though he went from stormtrooper, defector, kind of cowardly, to a hero of the Resistance. There's a reset. The Canto Bite art between him and Rose, most of us didn't care for that at all. We could have just done completely without it throughout the space chase. And the space chase doesn't make sense either, as many have pointed out over the years. The fact that the First Order could have simply jumped some Star Destroyers in front of the Resistance fleet, what was left of it, a few ships, but they didn't. They just keep chasing it with the Supremacy, this big giant flying space Dorito, which is Snoke's flagship. And so you eventually have this connection built between Kylo and Rey, which I guess appeases to the Reylo fans. It's interesting, the bond that these two have. And why is there a bond? Well, we find out. Luke's not happy about what's happening between her and Kylo because he's afraid that Rey's going to turn to the dark side. And there is some elements in Last Jedi that imply that there's a dark side to Rey. And in the end, Rey decides that she can't learn anything from Luke. I mean, she's only been there for literally a day or two. I mean, Luke was with Yoda for at least a few weeks or longer. Whereas, Rey, a few days at the most. Not enough time to learn anything. But, so she decides, F you, Luke, I'm out of here. She takes Chewbacca. She takes R2. By the way, there are a few scenes I did like. I would have liked more scenes with Luke and Chewbacca mourning Han, because that had only just happened, the death of Han Solo. It just previously happened. So you think there would have been some time for Luke and Chewbacca to hang out to mourn the loss of their dear friend. And there was a moment aboard the Millennium Falcon where Luke sneaks on board and he runs into R2. And that was a very touching moment between him and R2. They have this bond, this history together. And then, of course, R2 shows him a holo recording of young Leia, asking Obi-Wan Kenobi for help. Okay, so there was a moment from Last Jedi. I enjoyed it. Hit me right here. A few moments. But Rey's convinced that she can turn Kylo back to the light and stop the space chase and save what's left of the Resistance. So she, hands herself over to Kylo aboard the Supremacy. She takes, she's taken by Kylo to Snoke. And Snoke reveals how powerful he truly is. We still don't know anything about Snoke. We just know that he's a dark side wielder. He looks ancient. He looks powerful. And you have a moment where Rey tries to confront him, but Snoke shows how much more powerful he is than Rey, and just basically stops her and drags her around with his force powers. And even like she's reaching for the lightsaber, he grabs it and he basically bops her on the head with it. It just shows how powerful and intimidating Snoke is as a main antagonist in a sequel trilogy. And it makes you look forward to what they have planned for Snoke in Episode 9. And as Kylo is about to execute Snoke, you know what happens. Anakin's lightsaber happens to be sitting on the throne with Snoke, and Kylo basically torsos Snoke. Subverting of expectations. And I didn't have a problem with that, even though going into the movie, I kind of had a feeling that there was going to be something like that Snoke was not going to make out of Episode 8. I don't know why, but I had that feeling. And so you have an epic fight between Rey and Kylo teaming up together, fighting off the Paladin guards. It was epic, even though if you go back and rewatch some videos on it, the choreography kind of fails. But in the moment, it looks cool, right? One of those cool scenes. And there's a moment where you feel like that Rey and Kylo should be together. They should be a team, at least for the duration of Episode 8. Maybe go into Episode 9 and maybe they have a falling out. Maybe they decide to go a different way, let the past die, as Kylo says. And the fact that, he mentions that, Rey's parents were nobodies. They sold her for drinking money. And I actually like that. And that's something we'll talk about in a moment. But the fact that, Rey decides, no, I'm not going to be on your side, even though they had this bond, she decides, no, I'm not. And then they have this forced fight over Anakin's lightsaber. Explosion, it breaks in half. But don't worry, in episode 9, she'll take her sweet time trying to fix it. It won't be already fixed. I think they do it in the comics, I think, in between episode 8 and 9. I believe that's what happens. Okay. So, Space Chase ends up eventually leading to Crate, which is Hoth 2.0. It's Salt Hoth. But other mistakes I don't like is they turn Poe into a hothead, who's a hero of the Resistance. He helped destroy Starkiller Base, but Vice Admiral Hodo, who's left in command because Leia was jettisoned out the main bridge when it was hit earlier, along with the death of Admiral Akbar, who's unceremoniously killed. Thank you. Very cool, Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy, for killing a much-beloved Star Wars character from Return of the Jedi. But, Kathleen Kennedy's like that. And, Leia does her Mary Poppins force trick to get back inside the ship. And she's in a coma throughout most of the movie, leaving Vice Admiral Hodo in charge. And she and Poe had this unnecessary conflict. Whereas all Hodo has to do is take Poe into her quarters or some private room and explain to him her plan. The fact that she doesn't leads to conflict between the two and a mutiny on board the last remaining flagship of the Resistance. Unnecessary. Also unnecessary, sending off Finn and Rose to Casino Planet in order to find this code breaker in order to break the tracking device on the Supremacy. So it's all for naught in the end, because they find the wrong guy. He's also a code breaker, but he wasn't the code breaker they were looking for. And he ends up selling out Finn and Rose on the Supremacy for credits, and basically screws over what's left of the Resistance. Because of DJ, a lot more Resistance people end up being killed by the Supremacy and the First Order before they're able to land onto Salt Hoth, aka Crate. And so everyone makes it back to Salt Hoth. Admiral Hodo does the infamous Hodo maneuver and destroys or breaks apart the Supremacy. And it's a cool scene in concept, but the more people think about it, it's like, really? She just broke the Supremacy in half and destroyed several of the First Order Star Destroyers. And you really have to wonder, even at this point, like, how many Star Destroyers does the First Order have? How big is the First Order? It can't be as big as the Empire, but in the opening credits, it says that the First Order reigns across the galaxy, but it was just beginning its attack with destruction of the New Republic, in Force Awakens. So I can't imagine the First Order to be as big as the Empire was. But anyways, so you have Battle of Hoth 2 take place. You have larger, better, bigger Imperial walkers. First Order walkers. You have a standoff between, Luke and Kylo. We finally do get a moment between Luke and Leia, so thank you, Ryan, for at least giving us a moment between Luke and Leia, especially since the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher shortly after, recording of Last Jedi had complete. Sad, but at least there's a moment between brother and sister, right? And the showdown was pretty cool between him and Leia. And, between Luke and Leia's son, Kylo. I'm trying to, recover from that one. And it was cool looking. The holo projection thing was a nice, fake out by Luke. And it shows how powerful Luke actually is in the Force because he's reconnected with the Force. He's gotten some encouragement from Force Yoda, played once again by Frank Oz. And for some reason, Force Ghosts now have the ability to hit trees with Force Lightning. Who knew, right? And, so unfortunately, the distraction that Luke has buys the Resistance time to escape. Rey helps the Resistance escape by lifting up some rocks with Force powers. What's left of them get aboard the Millennium Falcon, get out of Crate, and head off into the stars because nobody came to help them. Nobody wanted to help the Resistance. And, Force Ghosts, Luke becomes a Force Ghost, I guess, in the end. He looks and fades away. And that was a mistake, in my opinion. All for naught, just a space chase, glorified, and so much potential with Episode 8. Oh, yeah, and Captain Phasma was there, and she's gone again. This time she actually gets killed, so yay. If you want to know more about Phasma, I guess you have to go read a book or some comics. So, anyways, yeah, it wasn't that good. It really wasn't. It just didn't like I left the movie theater not really impressed with The Last Jedi, and I really wish I would have followed through with my original review of this movie, but I chose not to. That was my choice. Got to accept the choices we make in life. But like I mentioned, there are some things I did like about The Last Jedi. More time with Snoke. I did enjoy that. I wish we would have had some actual answers, some good answers regarding Snoke, because you know for a fact, when they were writing The Force Awakens, it was Snoke that was supposed to be the main antagonist of the sequel trilogy. Most of us are fully aware of that, no matter what they say about Episode 9. They can lie all they want. We can tell you're lying. We know the original plan was for Snoke to be the main baddie, Episode 7, 8, and 9. Not fooling anybody, J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio and Kathleen Kennedy. We'll get to Rise of Skywalker soon enough. Don't worry. But yeah, other things I liked. The idea of Rey being a nobody. I actually like it because it says that anybody could be a hero. We could all be heroes. The Force is within a lot of us. And just like in the Jedi Temple in the Old Republic, there were a lot of Jedis, from across the galaxy, a lot of Force wielders. So a lot of them were really powerful, like Yoda, like Mace Windu, like a few others. So it's not in the realm of possibility that Rey was just related to nobody. Either she was going to be a Skywalker or possibly an Obi-Wan or somebody else. But she obviously couldn't be Leia and Han's daughter, because I think they would have known they had a daughter in Force Awakens. They had a son, but they didn't have a daughter. They would have kind of sort of known that. And I don't think they would have abandoned their daughter by her lonesome on Desert Planet 2. That's poor parenting right there. So I was okay with that answer when it came to Rey. I mean, it's not the answer I wanted, but I was at the time okay with it. But I wanted to know more about Snoke. I wanted Snoke to be more than what he ends up being. I think he deserved that because so much potential wasted in Snoke. And like I said, missed opportunity with Kylo and Rey after Snoke's death. She should have gone with him. Maybe the way it should have played out is, she convinces Kylo to allow Leia and the rest of the Resistance to live, because there's only so many of them left. And he takes what's left of the First Order, and they leave. They're like, they're gone, bye. And they leave the Resistance just hanging out on Hoth 2, or Salt Hoth, or whatever you want to call Crate. I know it's called Crate. But, yeah, missed opportunity there. Let's see, what else do we got? Phasma killed off again. Why did the First Order not blast Rose and Finn to bits after Finn tried to sacrifice himself in order to help the Resistance on Crate? And Rose just comes in at the last second and somehow manages to not get them both killed in the process. Both by that big giant blast, both by the crash, the weird looking salt speeders. Those things look like crap, by the way. That was the intention, I think. And then why didn't the super First Order walkers just blast them? I'm just saying. That's what they should have done. But anyways, more of what I didn't like. Still no answers to Snoke's origins till Episode 9. I'll circle back to a couple more things I did like really quick before I give you my rating. I do like the fact that Kylo is convinced by Snoke to destroy his mask, because, he was just being a Darth Vader fanboy in Force Awakens, and destroying the mask allows Kylo to assume his own identity as he becomes supreme leader of the First Order, and he doesn't need the mask. He doesn't need it. Vader needed the mask. Kylo doesn't. And like I mentioned already, Luke's Force hologramming Kylo was cool. But because of the fact that Carrie Fisher passed away and was not going to be able to be properly used in Episode 9, I think that Rian Johnson should have done a reshoot. And I'm not happy with him, and I'm obviously very unhappy with Kathleen Kennedy because they chose not to. They had plenty of time to go back and either edit the scene before he ghost fades, or simply just have a scene where he just stumbles back to his feet, he lifts up his X-Wing, and he flies off Octo to go join the fight against the First Order. Luke should not have been killed off at the end of The Last Jedi. He could have been killed off in Episode 9, but in Last Jedi, especially with Carrie Fisher gone, Leia Organa, in hindsight, that was yet another bad move by Rian Johnson. And for that, I also blame Kathleen Kennedy, because she could have stepped in. She could have listened to what Colin had to say and recognized that with what they had to go with to use and implement for Episode 9, basically scenes of Leia on the cutting room floor of Force Awakens, the only logical solution was to just have Leia die in between Episodes 8 and 9. Things happen in between episodes. She dies. Maybe at the beginning of Episode 9, they're mourning her. They're just mourning her passing, right? And anyways, we'll review Episode 9. It's coming. But overall, let's get to it. My ranking of The Last Jedi. I've done most of them so far. Where do I put it? Well, this was a tough one, because part of me wants to put it at the very, very bottom. But does it deserve to be at the very bottom? It's going to be close to the very bottom, because I'm going to put Last Jedi rank 8 out of 9. Now, does that mean that Rise Skywalker is way worse? I put them neck and neck when it comes to the battle for the bottom. They both have good qualities. They both have their bad qualities. But if you want to find out why I'm putting Rise of Skywalker at rank 9, you'll have to tune in next time. But the reason why I have Last Jedi at 8 instead of 9 is because there were still some moments to this movie. There were a few good moments, a lot of subverting of expectations, a lot of bad moments. The sequel trilogy desperately needed a head writer, a showrunner. Like I mentioned, I would have nominated Lawrence Kasdan as that role, and that is the fault of Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger and Disney, and for not having a vision for this sequel trilogy from start, middle to finish. And Episode 8 is where we see things start to fall apart, where we come to realize that they had no vision for the sequel trilogy, that it was nothing more than a money grab by Disney. We knew they wanted to make money off of Star Wars, and we'd be happy to give them our money, but give us a good product. Give us something that's going to connect together from start to finish, from Episode 7 to Episode 8 to Episode 9. That does not occur. And it's unfortunate, because this was a missed opportunity. And Episode 8 is the first step in undoing the sequel trilogy and ticking off a huge chunk of the Star Wars fan base, which ultimately become known as the Fandom Menace. Now, are there Star Wars fans out there that enjoyed The Last Jedi? Of course. Do I consider them to be any less Star Wars fans? No, because we all have our different points of view. We all have our different likes and dislikes when it comes to these films. And I don't want to cancel anybody. It's just my opinion. I don't like what was done with Rose's character, because I think that Kelly Marie Tran gets a lot of flack for it. Daisy Ridley gets a lot of flack. These are just actors and actresses that are making the best out of the content that they're given from the writers and the director. In this case, one and the same, Rian Johnson. Him and Kathleen Kennedy are to blame for the failure of The Last Jedi. The failure. Rian Johnson should have done a better job with making Episode 8 more cohesive with Episode 7. He obviously did not, because there was not a definitive plan from start, middle to finish. And it's unfortunate, because I do think that overall, he's a decent writer and director in his own right, but maybe he shouldn't have been in charge of Star Wars, or maybe Kathleen should have gave a damn about the continuity of this new trilogy, because it was going to be part of her legacy as president of Lucasfilm. That legacy's ruined, whether she cares or not. A lot of people in the Star Wars fan base don't really like you, Kathleen, and this is a big reason why. And, of course, Clone Wars getting canceled, even though they did bring it back for a final season, which I did review, by the way, along with Episodes 1 through 7 and Episode 8 now, which means we only have one episode left to review. Next time, we will be reviewing Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. But anyways, overall, that's what I think about Last Jedi. It's nearly at the bottom of my list. Nearly. But it wasn't as canon breaking as another film. Even though we don't like what was done with Luke. They could have done better by Luke, they being Ryan and Kathleen Kennedy. The space chase was boring. There should have been a time jump in between episodes 7 and 8. 6 months to a year. Time for Rey not to be a Mary Sue. Time for her to actually have a montage, as we talked about already. And so many other issues. But like I mentioned, there were a few things I did like about Last Jedi, I suppose. But anyways, I'm interested in your thoughts, your views, opinions, and how you ranked Star Wars The Last Jedi, the subverting of expectations, below in the comments section.